Hi, Wendy Dabrusin, certified divorce lending professional with the Divorce Lending Association and Benchmark Mortgage. Today, I am with Theresa Bastian with Let's Move Austin, and she is a certified divorce real estate expert in Austin. Theresa, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, a little bit of background knowledge about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Wendy. In terms of especially my work with divorcing couples, I think it's relevant to note that I am divorced. I went through that and, I just have a real connection for people that are going through times of transition. And so that's what led me to become a certified divorce real estate expert. I have 23 years experience in the business. I am a real estate broker. I own my own independent brokerage. So the family law divorcing cases are a part of what I do, but to me, they're just a very important part.
Right. Okay. And how long have you been in the business?
Oh, I've been doing real estate 23 years now.
Okay.
So
and
13
how long have you
in
been
all.
focusing on the divorce piece of it?
I've always worked with divorcing clients, especially, over the course of my career, some really difficult cases. But it was 3.5 years ago that I formalized the work I'd been doing and became a part of the alumni network's certified divorce real estate expert. I earned the designation. It's not one that you can just pay for and get letters behind your name.
Right.
You have to really do a lot of work. We had training that was from not only, top realtors, but we had training from judges. We had training from family law attorneys. We do continuing education from people that are, kind of cutting edge and really understand what's going on in the family law arena so that we as real estate professionals can mesh what we do with the larger aspects of the case and provide a great result for clients.
Yeah. So yeah, I know that, anybody, not anybody, but just any normal realtor can handle divorce cases, but having that background knowledge and that continuing knowledge and working in it almost every day makes a huge difference.
Well, there's so many things that you can miss if you're not specifically trained in it. For example, I have a neighbor who's the couple is going through a divorce, and she's going to move out of their current home. Her parents want to buy her a home using cash. I mean, wonderful. They have the opportunity to do that. But if they buy that house for her, put it in her name before her divorce is final, we're community property state, he could have rights to half of that house. So
Right.
that could really screw up their settlement situation. So I was able to hear that potential problem coming before they had gone down the road, already settled on doing that. And I was able to explain that and offer a solution so that they could buy the house in their name. Then once the divorce is final, they could use a quitclaim deed and assign the interest to her at that time after, the ex had moved on. So it may not at face seem like there are so many points that matter, whether you work with someone specifically trained in divorce or not, but there really are.
Yeah.
I'm sure you see it on the lending side.
One of the things that I've seen or actually heard that can happen is if you're not trained in the or not don't have the knowledge of the laws. For example, if someone is divorcing and they say, we're going through a divorce, but we want to sell our house now, and some listing agents will just jump on, take the listing, put it on MLS without checking to see if they're even legally allowed to sell. So kind of explain a little bit about that.
Sure. So I work really closely with the family law community here in Austin. I speak at the family law section of the Austin Bar Association. So a lot of the attorneys are familiar with me and that I do have a level of expertise. So sometimes, I can pick up a phone and call someone's attorney and I already have a relationship, or they'll sometimes call me and ask for advice. They're doing a mediation. They're like, well, how, can you have it on the market? Is 2 weeks realistic to put it on the market? They don't often know because lawyers they're dealing with so many aspects in a divorce, right? They could be dealing with child custody. They could be dealing with safety issues. They could be dealing with really who literally is keeping the lights on in that home financially and how is that happening? So I understand that for lawyers, the priority of the house is fairly low. So that's why it's good for make me have that as my priority so that they can focus on those other things.
Yeah. And so and this is a story that I've heard, or a possible issue that I've heard, that if someone goes and lists the house, sells it, and there was a temporary restraining order on
mhm.
it, and they sell it, then the court could order the buyer to give the house back. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
I mean, technically, you know, you would hope that that would come up somewhere along the line, but technically a court order wouldn't be found in a normal title search. So if
Right.
you're not on the alert to kind of foresee that that could be an issue, I mean, it potentially could happen.
Yeah.
I've certainly had it where situations where one spouse is in the house, it just looks like there's one person on title, because sometimes married people are not both on the title, both on the mortgage.
Right.
And somewhere along the way, you kind of hear from talking to the person that there may have been a divorce, and it's like, we're going to run title. We're going to find out who's on there, because, you know, sometimes one spouse can list a house, but you need both signatures to close it. So
Right.
you don't want to get invested in the time and process and then have a buyer thinking they're going to buy that house, when in reality, you don't have both parties' agreement to sell.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So doing the research up front is
Yeah.
probably the best thing
Well,
for.
and just knowing what questions to ask,
Right.
because if you're not, it's not like this stuff is obvious. If you're not looking for those things, you may not even, they may not present themselves.
Right. Right. So as far as, if someone is going through a divorce, or just starting to consider it, and they do have a house involved, or what type of heads up would you give to anybody in that situation?
Well, I would suggest that in the time when you're even just considering a separation or a divorce, is you can do a consultation. Like, I offer consultations just like lawyers offer consultations. It doesn't, because oftentimes the house may never be sold in a divorce, right? One party may exchange the value of the house for, the value of a 401k or something. So I'm aware that a lot of people don't want to call a realtor because they're not sure they want to sell the house, or they're sure they don't want to sell the house. But consult with me so that we can talk your situation through, say, well, what about this? What about this? This might be a way to approach that. I have found the clients that do that, sometimes they'll call me 6 months later and say, we are going to sell the house. We want you to do it. Sometimes I never hear from them again, but I feel like they went into their decision to go to mediation, or their decision to meet with a financial planner. They just have this piece of the puzzle explained to them, and they feel
Right.
confident about that. And that's important to me.
Yeah. Because a lot of them, especially right now, looking at, they might say one of them wants to keep the house. Well, in my situation, if somebody doesn't contact me up front, we don't even know if they can afford to refinance,
That's right.
or because they can't just take over, a mortgage company is not just going to
Remove
remove
the
them.
name of the mortgage. That's
Right.
right. I have come behind, I'll tell you what, there's been times when I've worked on a listing, the parties have been divorced for over a decade, still both of them on the mortgage. And the spouse that was in the house was no longer really a functional member of society, but the other spouse's credit had been dragged down and down and down, and the
Right.
house was in foreclosure. But there was a ton of equity.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense. But so I was able to sell that house and get back alimony, back child support, to the spouse that really had suffered through this, because they did not separate themselves at the time of divorce. So I'm a big advocate for separating,
Yeah.
if it's at all possible, and really knowing what the potential pitfalls are if you don't separate.
Yeah.
But right now I'm really aware, you might have a mortgage at 3.5% interest. Well, if you refi to take one person's name off, you may be doubling your interest. So you're going to
Yeah.
change that payment. You have to think these things through.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm running into a lot, because I'm like, it just, and it's a little difficult to get one person approved. They're used to making this payment. They can afford that payment, but now the payment's several $100s higher. They may not afford it anymore. So at that point, they need to sell and they don't really have a choice.
I think that's one thing that when I talk to someone that's, got the benefit, they've talked to me fairly early in their planning process. One thing I like to say is kids are resilient. A lot of times I find one spouse wants to keep the house primarily so kids don't have to move, kids don't have to be affected. And I think that sometimes you have to weigh that desire with the very real possibility. Like if your mortgage payment is unaffordable, your kids are going to notice that in lots of other ways.
Right.
It might be better to move to something affordable and still be able to have the kids in their sports activities and, going to birthday parties and not feeling that everything is a drain on your personal economy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to consider, and the sooner we can talk about them, the better. So they're not emergency decisions. There's so many things in a divorce that are so emotional. And if we can just talk through the real estate aspect of it, pros and cons, try to set the emotions aside for this conversation, it can be really effective.
Yeah. So do you get court, I guess, has the court assigned you a case before?
It happens a lot of ways. Sometimes I'll have a mediator suggest my name. So it may be then the mediator has heard me speak or has, been referred to me. Sometimes the lawyers one of the lawyers will call me and ask, do you have room for this case? I think we're going to settle. I'm going to recommend your name to the judge and the judge will order it. I've even had some where I'm contacted by the divorcing couple, one or both of them, and they're like, we just got divorced. The judge put your name in our orders. I don't personally know the judge. I don't know these people. And they're like, come sell our house by, May 15th.
Yeah.
So it can happen a lot of ways. Oftentimes people that are just going through a divorce, they might contact me before they even really proceed down legal. And some people are able to do it pretty amicably. Not every divorce is, big guns a-blazing and attorneys in a courtroom.
Yeah.
So I think I'm prepared to handle it coming from any angle at this point.
Yeah. And another point of not being educated on the divorce process, there might be some real estate agents that don't realize that they have to be very neutral in this situation, right? Because if you're only given information to one, I'm sure that could be a problem with the court and that could come up. So kind of how do you handle something that is contentious?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because in my code of ethics as a certified divorce real estate expert, we subscribe to an additional code of ethics beyond what a regular realtor has. And one of those points is neutrality. So even if I, hear a lot from the spouse that's in the property, because I may interact with that spouse more, getting the house ready to sell, I can't buy into whatever griefs are being aired. Yeah. And similarly, just because you're not in the house doesn't mean you're not telling me things. What I tell both people, sometimes we meet together, most often it's separate, but I say, I'm here for the house.
Yeah.
I've been given an assignment either by you or a judge or mediator. And I know you might not all feel great about it, but there's a job on the table. I'm assigned to do it. I'm going to get you the most money for this house in the sale.
Yeah.
And sometimes I know how it's going to be split. It's not always 50-50, right? One spouse not really care how much because they're getting a very small percentage of it. So you have to be careful. Like it's not a normal motivator for a seller necessarily.
Right.
But I just say I'm here for the house. I said, there's going to be all kinds of things that are probably happening in the course of your divorce that you're emotionally up or emotionally down or frustrated about something. But when it comes to this part, I promise you, I'm just here for the house. So you can ask me your questions about the house. We can stay focused on the house. And my job to sell the house is more important than me picking a side between, who's right and wrong in this. I'm not the judge in this.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you probably feel like you're stuck in the middle sometimes when one wants to maybe complain about the other. But okay, so that's brought up a good point. Does the court or do the attorneys agree to, let's say, okay, we're listing it at X amount, but as long as we get this amount, we have to accept it? Like, so there's not any arguing back and forth on if they're going to accept an offer?
again, this is one reason I teach and do trainings for the family law community, because again, in the priority of things they have to consider, the real estate is fairly low in this could become an emergency list, right? It's not, violence, it's not child custody. So I'm appreciative that it's a low priority for them sometimes, but they often don't know the impact of how they word orders and how easy or difficult it can make my life. Now, sometimes they just say the listing agent will pick the price. That sounds like a gift to give me that ability, but that's also tough because now those sellers may not trust me to pick the price. Oh, she just wants to get it done. She's going to put it in a bargain basement. So there's no easy way to pick a price, especially if one or more of the parties don't really want to sell. But the most effective are sometimes orders will say the parties are to decide on a price by this date. In the event they cannot reach agreement, the listing agent will choose it. In the event it doesn't sell in 30 days, a price reduction is ordered. There are really clever ways to do orders that would allow the sales process to go forward without having to come back to those sellers having to spend money on attorneys and possibly going to a judge every time something needs to be discussed with the house.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't always get written that way. I try to take as much, there's often negotiating between the two sellers before I could even get an offer from a buyer to negotiate with. So I try to build rapport and keep all that in-house as much as possible, because I know, every time they call their attorney, charges by the hour are adding up. So I try to take that off their plate, let them focus on pursuing their ultimate settlement.
Yeah. And I could see where it would be, because again, attorneys know what they know. And a lot of times they don't know real estate and they don't know things to think about. So that's why it's important, I think, for
They
you
don't know I
to
didn't
educate. Yeah.
You'll also see things that say, let's say the wife is the one in the house. The wife is to pay for all the things to make the house ready for sale. The husband will reimburse her 50% at closing. Well, that's great if the wife has any money to pay for things up front. That's great if, like, who gets to decide what things are, because her idea might be different than what a professional's idea of getting ready for closing is. It'd be nice to see, a line item budget set, or even say this much money is in escrow for the listing agent to get the house ready. It's just all variety. You have to be ready for anything. You have to be ready for some people to be cooperative, some not, some to be polite through it, definitely some not.
Yeah.
But again, I've been brought in to make this house sell so that these people can move forward with their lives.
Right.
And that's where I think my experience with divorce personally is like, it might not feel good at all right now, or fair, or anything, but there's so much life on the other side of this. That's what I'm there to get them to.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. They're, in it, we know how important it is to have the divorce settlement agreement worded a certain way to help. So I'm glad that, we're educating as many people as possible. I know you guys have a series about an education series for attorneys. And what is
it's
that
called?
called?
Raising the Bar. It goes every month, and we have an expert in the divorce community speaking on topics that would be relevant for attorneys. So they're not always real estate related.
Yeah.
One of our most popular ones, there's this app that allows divorcing people or divorced people to communicate regarding mainly co-parenting issues in a neutral way. So it's not text messages, it's in the app, so they can be viewed by attorneys or judges and preserved as evidence very easily. So it tends to keep the emotions down more than, sometimes when we're mad, we get to be keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
This is kind of like, on note, watch your tone, be polite. That was a really popular. We had the guys that founded that on.
It's My Family, what is it called? We're just drawing a blank.
I'm drawing a blank.
My Family Calendar or something like that. I'm drawing a blank too, and I have it on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, I've heard, while you're looking that up, I've heard that that's very good. And if they have, orders from their attorney to, this is the only way you're going to communicate. You're not going to start with this text messaging back and forth and all of that. And that way, there's a record of everything. So I think that's great.
Yeah, another really popular, it's Our Family Wizard. I found it.
Our family, I know it's my family, our family wizard.
I was divorced so long ago. We didn't have that, but
Yeah. Mine was like, I don't know, 30 something years ago, 30,
yeah.
almost
There was
30.
no apps back then.
Yeah.
But another really popular one we had was a forensic CPA who talked about different ways. And family lawyers, they have to stay up on so much. They have to stay up on like Bitcoin. How do you determine how much Bitcoin one spouse might have and what the value of that is and how to unlock it to be fair in a settlement? I mean, they have a lot on their plate.
Yeah, for
So we
sure.
try to bring the cutting edge in the industry.
Yeah. Do you have any like cases that have stuck out with you or anything that's very memorable?
Oh, I think the one where I had to have the papers to sell, person was the spouse, the spouse that was in the house was actually arrested while we were under contract.
And you
And had to
go
get
to the jail?
yeah, had to get him, I had to convince his mom to accept power of attorney to sign the closing papers.
Okay.
He initially didn't want to help him at all. But again, I was trying to close this, not so much to help him, but to help the ex-spouse and the kids that had been jilted for a long time.
Yeah.
So I got her to agree to that, but I had to have him sign power of attorney papers. So I had to get those papers to a prison 6 hours from where I live and then try to time it so he could be out with the notary to sign it at the right time, the right day, in time to meet all the deadlines of the thing.
Yeah.
It was a lunacy, but
holding it together. So are there any important lessons that you've learned over your career?
Well, I think one is for people not to fixate too much about staying in the home. Sometimes that can be, someone says that's the most important thing to them. When again, have you really thought through the financial implications of that? I see it happen just so many times.
Yeah.
People strive to get the house in the divorce, and they often, negotiate a lot of things away. Like they take the house instead of like a better setup for themselves. And then a couple years later, they're selling the house because they really can't afford it anyway. Now it hasn't been maintained well for a couple years. It's worth even less than what it would have been. It just isn't always the smartest thing to keep the house.
Yeah.
And I guess lessons, I would say, if you can stay focused on the horizon and not what's right in front of you today. I mean, going through divorce, it just is a kind of crummy time of life, even if it's the divorce you asked for, or you are ready to be done with this marriage. It doesn't happen overnight, and that process is tricky. So being able to stay focused on what's ahead of you and surround yourself with people that are forward thinkers, that can be useful too.
Yeah. Well, that is some good tips. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I really appreciate you sharing your time. Theresa Bastian, and she is a CDRE, Certified Divorce Real Estate Expert, and Let's Move Austin. How can people get a hold of you?
My cell phone is 512-297-3442. It's on our company website at letsmoveaustin.com. For any attorneys watching and listening, I have an attorney-based website called austindivorceagent.com. And from that website, you can find me and request, title searches or property valuations, that sort of thing that's more attorney-based.
Okay. And then your CLE classes are called Raising the Bar. And is there a specific website to sign up for that?
Actually, I need it. It'll charge you if you go to the website. So I would say drop me an email, Theresa at letsmoveaustin.com, or hit it through the website, because then I can send you a code with like an email with my code, so you can get it for free.
Yes, and I got that, and I actually joined one of them, and I appreciate it being free.
Did you like the
content? I'm not getting CLE, but it's nice to kind of sit in and listen to.
They're good. They're high quality. So yeah. I've been very happy with my sponsorship of them. So I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Any final thoughts from you today?
Just, take your time, include a real estate professional, ideally one that is versed in divorce real estate, include them in your package of people that's helping you through this. You You haven't probably an attorney, at least you've consulted with one, probably have, some kind of therapist, probably have talked to a financial planner. If you own a house or you have investment properties, you owe it to yourself to also talk to a divorce trained real estate professional.
And lender.
That's right. But it's true. The decisions need guidance. They deserve guidance.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.